Crystal clear waters, exploited for what lies below. According to the 2010 U.S. Geological Survey, an estimated 1.7 billion barrels of oil and 3.5 trillion cubic meters of gas can be found in the eastern Mediterranean's Levant Basin province, never mind nearby waters. The massive reserves have prompted Cyprus, Greece, Israel, Egypt, Turkey, and others in the area to tap into the sea. However, a disputed maritime territory in the region has created tensions between Greece and its neighbor, Turkey. In July, Turkey announced that it was going to send a survey ship to the waters off the coast of a Greek island in the area. The plan was seemingly brought to an end when the U.S. and France both sent their navy to the region to conduct military exercises with the Greeks. Shortly after, though, the Turkish ship hit the water anyway, and adding to tensions, it was flanked by 5 Turkish naval vessels. While Turkey, however, seems determined to continue its exploratory mission, and some say it may be more out of desperation than aggression. Currently, Turkey is experiencing energy issues. The nation is heavily reliant on Russian oil and gas, and technical problems with shared pipelines have cut the flow, making that fact more evident than ever. Add that the US and EU seem to be siding with Greece in the dispute. Many believe Turkey has been pushed into a corner and is lashing out. Right now, U.S. Navy vessels have joined others from the European Union and Russia, raising concerns that tensions in the area could quickly escalate, possibly setting off a powder keg in the eastern Mediterranean, while creating a dangerous crack in NATO.
All right, Shalom. This is Hara 1 by Yasha Allah of the Lions Den Camp. I want to say Kal Halayim by Yahweh by Hashem Yahweh Shai by Hashem Harakah Kodash Ma'amath. Double honor to the elder apostles of GMS and the elders. Shalom to you, Akim and Akwatim, your children that believe in sincerity and truth around the 4 corners of the earth. This is Mark 3:24. And if a kingdom be divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. And if a house be divided against itself, that house cannot stand. And if Satan rise up against himself and be divided, he cannot stand, but hath an end. Okay, so now this is you use that terminology, the scripture, and you apply it to Esau today. All right, the kingdom, their kingdom that they set up on this earth is divided. All right, and all the coalitions and treaties. Right, the first world order that they set up, and now it's all divided. And it says, if a house be divided, it cannot stand. America's divided, right? The house of Esau is divided, you know. Europe is divided. It says, and if Satan rise up against himself and be divided, he cannot stand, but have an end. So now they're even rising up against themselves. All right. You got Turkey, all these European countries, in Eurasian countries like Turkey and Russia and also Greece, right? And even America getting involved, France, all these European countries and Middle Eastern countries, they're going to war against each other. And it's all over money, land grabs, assets, you know, because this whole system is changing. They're moving to a new world order. But in the midst of that, the Lord said they're going to be divided. All right, you had the European Union, which really started around 1971, but you had NATO. It says there's a crack. This is going to cause a major crack in NATO. And you already had the Brexit, right? The British exit from NATO. You know, the ITEL exit, which is Italy and France. All these different nations pulling away from the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which was started in April of 1949. All right. And over since then, a lot of countries have joined into it, and it's become the military stronghold for the European Union. All right. So powerful that European Union didn't even need an army. It was using NATO as its army and America as the spearhead for NATO. All right. So NATO was divided. And you even have the Roman Empire, or Rome, as one of those countries, as in the NATO North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So it's partly iron and partly clay. It's being divided, being weakened, but it still had that strength of the Roman Empire, all right, because those Edomites, those elite bankers. But now it says Revelations 13:1, and I stood upon the sand of the sea, and it saw a beast rise up out of the sea, and the sea represents the people, and all these Edomites that came together, these elite bankers, they came together and formed what you call the beast. All right, the beast would be NATO. All right, and it rose up, and it says having 7 heads and 10 horns, and the 7 heads represent the European Union nations, and NATO represents the 10 horns. And you have what's called today is the Western European Union, and that's the one that was established as the dragon. Was connected from the European Union to NATO to America. All right. And upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the names of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and on his feet were as the feet of a bear. All right. So it started, their whole system started with the Greek Empire, with Alexander the Greek. All right, way back in 334 BC, you know, when they took the Persian Empire from what was the last guy's name? Darius III. All right, and that through them came the Diadochi and their whole pagan Roman Empire with Antiochus Epiphanes, and so on, all the way until the triumvirate with the Roman Empire. All right, so it's all stemmed from that. And NATO was supposed to be the driving force, moving in a military fashion like the Greeks. And his feet were as the feet of a bear, so the end of it is going to be through Russia. All right, and that's what NATO was put there for, to be a protection for the European Union, the European countries, against Russia and against China. All right. So it says, in his mouth as the mouth of a lion. So it's talking about Britain. And Britain joined in to NATO a little later. All right. And now they pulled away from NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which is something called the Brexit. And it happened in, I think, 2016. That's when they first started really pushing it. All right. And through that ignited and reestablished the Soviet Union again, once the European Union was broken up. So now they actually talking about going to war with each other. So what's that? That's Satan divided against Satan, and they're rising up against each other. So they have an end coming up soon. And Satan represents what? Adversary. All right, so our adversaries. And the dragon gave him his power and seat and great authority. See, NATO was established by the European Union, elite bankers. Okay, and that's where they get their power seat from. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. And that's talking about the Roman Empire. Okay, and his deadly wound was healed. All right. Now, in the Western Roman Empire fell around what was called the 410 AD, called the fall of Rome. All right, the sack of Rome. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. So everybody looking like, oh man, this is basically the Roman Empire all over again. And they worshiped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast. And they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? So all these other nations were in fear of NATO, which is a military branch. If you attack one, you attack all. And they all come together and help. And they send their troops, called something called the NATO Army. And as all these different countries come together, all right, to protect the EU, European Union, to protect the NATO allies, and to protect America. But now they all turning against each other. Ain't that something, man? It's all prophecy. All right, and they even going threatening war over that oil and that land. I think it was around Cyprus, if I'm not mistaken, where Turkey took some ships over there and started drilling and pumping out oil. And now you have the Greeks saying, "Yo, what are you doing? That's our area." So the Most High ain't no joke, man. He love conflict. All right. It says, "Who is like unto the beast," or NATO, "who is able to make war with him?" And it's a war machine. "And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. So NATO, the spearhead for NATO became America. And the president around the 1950s, you had, I think his name was Eisenhower. And he came up with what you call, on the dollar, it says, "In God They Trust," or "One Nation Under God." He was known as the perfect promoter or spokesman. They even idolized this dude, man. And he was a devil. And he was the mouthpiece for NATO. All right. Now, and he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme him, his name, and his tabernacle, and them that dwell therein. So he was lying on the scriptures. And that's when America became this whole Christian country, you know, trying to outdo Russia, because Russia was known as an atheist country. All right, so they took on the guise of Christianity, which is nothing but religion. And America is not a God-fearing country at all. It's nothing but paganism. All right, and it was established by pagans. You see that? And the NATO is a pagan establishment as well. So it says, "And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. Power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations." So let me get this real quick. This is Daniel 2:45. "For as much as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands," talking about Yahushua, all right, and the government of Israel, "and that it break in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold." All right. It's talking about the statue of Nebuchadnezzar, talking about all the kingdoms that were upon the earth. All right. All the way from the Assyrian Empire to the Babylonian Empire to the Persian and the medieval Persian Empire to the Greeks to the Romans, and all the way to the miry clay, part clay, part iron, and silver. Right. It says the gold, the clay, the silver, the great power have Yahweh have made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter. And the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure. So I'm gonna go down to 40. All right, I'm gonna go up to 40. I mean, it's a lucky. It says right here, Daniel 2. Daniel 2. And start from 40. "And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron." And it's talking about the Roman Empire. All right, so strength, it was real strong through their military. All right, and their riches. "For as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdue all things." So they took over the whole known world at that time. All right, just like America. "And as iron that breaketh in all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided." So it's being divided now. That kingdom, Rome, even today it's called the European Union, NATO, and America. So the Lord was letting us know that the Roman Empire was going to be established on the earth again in the last days. All right. So the Lord could bring that judgment upon it from when he was on the earth. So so now it says what? And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, so that's the end of the feet represent the end of something, the kingdom. All right. And the toes would be 10 toes. So that's the same 10 toes spoken of in Revelations that I was just reading. All right, NATO. It says part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. So NATO is divided. It says a big crack in NATO now, especially they're rising up against each other. But there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, so the strength of the European Union, all right, of Europe. So it still got some allegiance in Europe, especially with the Brexit. Right, even Britain, they left Europe. The Brexit, the Europe, they left NATO. They're able to do deals with other countries, but they still have the protection and the free travel without having to pay taxes over there in Europe, right? Amongst the other European Union countries and the NATO countries. So they're still part of that whole conglomerate. It says, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay. All right, so partly strong, partly broken. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. So he says a big crack in NATO now, man. All right, they fighting over this oil and land and riches and the top seat and power. And so it's partly strong and partly broken, man. This is prophecy. Kal halayim le'yahau b'Hashem Yahushai. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, that's their power. He said, because the kingdom was like iron. They shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. So they mix them with different nations, like the Africans, France trying to get with Africa. But Africa is rejecting France. All right. And so on and so on. All these other nations trying to link up with these Middle Eastern countries, but they're getting rejected. It says, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. See? So the strong country not going to be able to really mix with the weaker countries in the new world order. It says, in the days of these kings shall Yahweh, the power of heaven. So in these days, it's happening right now. And he's setting you, the believers, up as his kingdom, Yahweh, B'Hashem Yahushai. And in the days of these kings shall Yahweh, the power of heaven, set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. Ain't that something? And the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. And that's what we're coming up to, man. All right. For as much as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it break in pieces the iron and brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great power Yahweh hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter, and the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure. All right, so that I'm going to say, Kal halayim le'yahau b'Hashem Yahushai, b'Hashem harakah kodash ma'amah. Double honor to the elder apostles of GMS and the elders. Shalom to you, Akim, and Agwatim, and children that believe in sincerity and truth around the four corners of the earth. The prophecies coming to pass, man. And give praises to the Most High and his son, Yahweh, by Hashem Yahushai, because we're almost out of here, and his word is sure.